And welcome to FTB Fridays. It is Friday, January the 15th, 2021. It's about 12:20 p.m. Eastern time in the afternoon. Last week we were going to talk about Montreal politics, but of course, a lot of stuff happened, namely a curfew in Quebec and an attempted coup d'etat in the United States. So we got pushed off to this week, but 2021 is an election year in Montreal. And if this was 4 years ago, I think myself and today's guest would know exactly what we were going to do, get out there all excited and go Projet. But things have changed a bit on the landscape. Welcome, my guest, a political observer and occasional participant, Niall Ricardo.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So yeah, 4 years ago, we were all, to be completely honest, both of us have actually volunteered for Projet Montréal. Help get them elected.
Well, actually, I had a paid position in the last election with Projet Montréal. I was co-campaign manager for Côte-des-Neiges-NDG, which is the borough that has been making the headlines recently a lot. But I was co-campaign manager for Sue Montgomery, actually, and obviously the whole team out there of Projet Montréal candidates.
And I volunteered one day on that campaign. So I was the one volunteering. I showed up one day to make some phone calls. And of course, I declared in all my articles that I was supportive. But yeah, that's an interesting place to start because the Sue Montgomery and Projet Montréal are not on the same, and Valérie Plante are not on the same ticket this year. Samantha Gold on our site interviewed Sue Montgomery. You can check the article that's up there. But she recently won a court case.
Yeah, she did. She won a court case with La Cour du Québec. I don't know if it's La Cour du Québec or La Cour supérieure, but anyways, like she won that court case.
It's superior.
It was it's Cour supérieure. Yeah, that's what I thought. But it was pretty slam dunk from what I was reading. Obviously, downtown kind of doesn't have the right to basically decide for the boroughs how the boroughs should manage their internal affairs. And it kind of speaks to a lot of the problems that we've been seeing. I mean, I'm not going to speak for you, Jason, but kind of the problems that I think a lot of people have been seeing with Projet Montréal recently is not so much that we don't agree with the policies that they're implementing, is how they implement those policies and how, they have kind of put to the side a lot of the militant base that was there that, helped Projet win in the last election, built up Projet from the ground up, right? So I think it just speaks to that, and it speaks to the heavy hand that sometimes, downtown has had with borough administrations, right?
Yeah. Because that's like, I was like, you're hearing stories like this with Sue Montgomery, obviously, and overall, but also there was a couple of stories like I'm still, I mean, honestly, I'm at this point, there's not really much other choice. I'm pretty sure I'm still going to vote for Projet Montréal this time. But because, I mean, the alternative is, I think, Denis Coderre coming back or nothing.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to go.
There's no alternative.
Yeah.
Like Margaret Thatcher would say.
Yeah. Well, there might be an alternative in Côte-des-Neiges-NDG because, I mean, Sue Montgomery did, at least policy-wise, she was very close to, it was the same policy she ran on with Projet. I'm pretty sure she was still implementing those policies. But that is strictly the borough mayor position that she's starting a new party as of yet unnamed, but it's not, it's just going to be a borough party. It's not going to run for the whole city. And the thing is, I think this election really, maybe if Coderre gets back in, it might be a bit of a different story, but this is really a sort of a referendum on Valérie Plante.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's a referendum on Valérie Plante. It's a referendum on, I think that Projet took a very, they did a lot of very radical, quote unquote, stuff for the city of Montreal. I mean, the city of Montreal that we have today is not the city of Montreal that Denis Coderre left it with. And we can't forget also, right, that, Denis Coderre left this city with, a huge amount of debt. It was kind of in disarray. I mean, the Formula E or the Formula E, right, disaster, which was a huge scandal, right?
We had a racetrack. We have a racetrack. Why'd they have to do it in City Street?
Exactly, and especially downtown, right? I mean, they were doing that right smack downtown, creating all of those congestion problems that were already, problematic with regard to traffic, and made small businesses lose a lot of money. But beyond that, I mean, it was just trying to please the buddies that Coderre had. And then if I'm not mistaken, he got a contract with the people that he was helping there. So, I mean, needless to say, Montreal is Sin City. Needless to say, Montreal had a lot of problems with corruption over the years. And I think that people kind of forget that with the Projet Montréal administration. I mean, I'm the first to say that I have qualms with what went down with Projet Montréal in the past 4 years. Obviously, there's some stuff that, we would have liked to see as, left-leaning people in the city of Montreal that wasn't implemented by the city. But this being said, we also, to credit is due to kind of Projet Montréal, because yes, there's been scandals and stuff like that, but in the grand scheme of things, right? The scandal that happened with Sue Montgomery, the scandal that happens, in Villeray Parc Extension, Saint-Michel, right? With the mayor there, the borough mayor there. I mean, all in all, we kind of forget that Michael Applebaum was mayor of Montreal.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that Michael Applebaum was
arrested
was arrested for corruption, right?
Yeah.
That actually, and this is a very sordid story, and I don't necessarily want to be, sensationalist about it, but a former employee of his at NDG Côte-des-Neiges, took his own life because of that scandal, right?
Really? Wow.
And,
I didn't know that.
And a lot of stuff that there's still a lot of stuff we don't know about that. And that whole group of people, right? It'd be Michael Applebaum, it'd be Michel Tremblay, the old mayor of Montreal, that said, oh, I didn't know about any of the things that were happening with construction, as if you can be mayor of Montreal and not know about, what was transpiring pretty much everywhere across the city lines. They're the people that supported Denis Coderre. Right?
Yeah.
So Denis Coderre is just one of the same, right?
Well, the party still exists. Ensemble Montréal is former Équipe Coderre. I mean, currently
it's interesting to see. It's interesting to see the so-called opposition in the city of Montreal, because, like, are they really in opposition though? I mean, it seems like, sometimes they shoot left and sometimes they shoot right. So, they were basically, what were they saying about speculation? I found that really interesting. They were talking about, real estate speculation in Montreal and how, was unacceptable. And then this week they were talking about, the homeless situation. It's as if these guys weren't part of the municipal administration for 20 plus years, right? It's as if, so for me, it's like, as you said, the choice is going to be very, very difficult for us progressives in the next election, because obviously, we don't want Denis Coderre and the boys club,
whoever their
boys club, to come back come back into power. But at the other hand, there are qualms that, it's normal for us to have with the Projet Montréal.
Well, mentioning the homeless in particular, one thing that I noticed you picked up on, and I definitely picked up on, is when they kicked out the tent city there with the police. Like, that was not. I don't think that was.
I was expecting better, as somebody who I mean, my involvement in Projet, to be completely clear with everybody, and to be, avoir carte blanche and all of that, put everything on the table. I was involved with Projet since basically 2012. I remember that we actually, I think, met each other in the Projet campaign in 2013.
NDG, Michael Simkin,
and NDG. And Michael Simkin, who was running for mayor, who was a good friend of mine. And that's when I met pretty much everybody. Peter McLean, Magda Popianu was elected during that campaign. So, I mean, for me, I would have never expected, being a militant with Projet Montréal for a long time, card-carrying member for a few years too, I would have never expected to see Projet Montréal have that heavy hand that they had with, the homeless, the tent city, basically, as you called it, in Hochelaga.
Well, it was all over. There's some by the Lachine Canal. I saw.
There's some by the Lachine Canal. The other day, I was down here near Griffintown. I know that there's a few popping up. And to tell you the truth, it's very difficult for Projet, right? Because Projet, they come into a situation, and I think nuance is necessary. And this, that they come into a situation where, they don't have the power to, from one day to the next, kind of in 4 years. Without federal investment and provincial investment and the underfunding of social housing for decades, right? They don't have the power to have a magic wand and kind of create social housing. This being said, sending in riot cops and cops on horses was absolutely not necessary, right? So, and as I said, I was completely surprised as somebody who was like part of Projet Montréal for a long time, that Valérie Plante, who was the left-wing candidate in that leadership race, and who we all supported, and we thought that she was going to have, like, I would have expected better. And I would have expected actually Valérie, and I know in a difficult position, but I would have expected Valérie to go down to that tent city and to call on her colleagues from the provincial government and the federal government and say, hey, what's happening here is also your fault, and you guys should come down here and meet with these people and find solutions for these people, right? So
yeah. I mean, for me, like, there's stuff like that, and there's a few other things that they did that I really didn't like. But there are some things that they've been doing that I mean are still good. For example, the name escapes me right now, but Valérie Plante recently appointed an
anti-racism.
Yes, anti-racism commissioner, and Legault, Premier Legault is not too thrilled with this choice because for some reason this anti-racism commissioner has a problem with the racism in Bill 21. I guess he was, but like see, that's something at least where we can give some kudos to Plante for picking someone like that. I think at least.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of criticism of Plante with regards to racism, etc. Right in Montreal. For me, I think that, and I'm very happy with the nomination of Projet, somebody I know personally and who is completely, capable of that, of the position. And I think she's going to be able to really, put her finger on the issue of racism and actually, I think deliver on it, which is super important because she's proven in her career that she was capable of delivering in neighborhoods, like Montreal North, etc. I mean, as of Legault, I mean, for the first time, I think a lot of times I think about becoming a Montreal sovereigntist with the idea that, kind of like the two solitudes are not just Anglophone Canada and Francophone Canada, it's actually Montreal versus the rest of Quebec. Because I think that everybody, or at least the majority of people in Montreal, agree that we have a problem with systemic racism. The fact that Legault said that he wanted somebody from the SPVM to be named, that he was let down by the appointment, by the nomination, because he thought that somebody from the SPVM should be named because they have quote unquote such an expertise in the field of systemic racism, which is hilarious.
They do. They have an expertise in implementing systemic racism. In fact, they're better at it than most.
Yeah, they're better at implementing some systemic racism, probably one of the best police forces in the country about implementing systemic racism. I mean, when you saw the reports that came out, with the regards to stop and frisk and all of the stuff that, carding, et cetera, racial profiling that the SPVM has done, over the past years, it was pretty damning. Our report was pretty damning for the SPVM. And then, if I'm not mistaken, they didn't want to answer questions. They didn't want to answer the journalists' questions after that report came out because, why would they answer about that, right? So, I mean, it's just once again, Legault is playing politics, right? Yeah. Because his base obviously don't want somebody who's critical of Bill 21, but it would be kind of surprising.
His base isn't even Montreal. He has 2 seats in Montreal.
Exactly, right? Yeah. Exactly.
He doesn't need us for the majority, yeah.
He doesn't care about Montreal, but I mean, at the end of the day, isn't a commissioner's place to be critical of the administration, right? Yeah. Like, isn't somebody who's actually going to work on racism and systemic racism, aren't they there to speak truth to power and to actually put their finger on stuff that we don't want to talk about? Because if we all agree, then why do you have a, commissaire au racisme, right? I mean, if you don't agree with the premise that systemic racism exists, then you wouldn't have a commissioner in the first place, right? Yeah. And it's also very rich coming from a government that, named a former police officer, the head of the SPVM, right, as, the Minister for Indigenous Affairs in this province, right? And and they don't recognize systemic racism with regards to Indigenous peoples in this province. So, I mean, I'll take it with a grain of salt, whatever Legault says about this nomination.
Yeah, backing up a little bit specifically with Montreal. Now, there's the people, I call them, I guess, the CJAD crowd or the Gazette crowd. They're never going to, they didn't vote for Projet Montréal last time. They won't vote for them this time. They'll just, and also some of them will pick up on stories, even stories that the left would appeal to, and use that. Anything that's can be used to criticize Projet, they'll use it. Then there's the people like the people who are the diehard supporters. They can do no wrong. I'm not just talking about the actual elected officials. I'm talking about some supporters like that they will find excuses for all the things that they like. Personally, I like the blocking the cars on the mountain. I think they didn't go far enough, but I didn't like, for example, her suggesting randomly to name a station after Bernard Laundrie when it's clearly should be Griffintown. Stuff like. There's people like us who are on the left who are critical, like we don't really have a choice. But what about the general public? They're really the ones who are going to decide the election. The people who don't pay that much attention to Montreal politics, but pay attention enough to vote. I mean, do you think anyone like, do you think just strictly strategically, do you think Plante's getting back in?
That's a tough question because, I mean, I think that Plante is a fighter and she does better in campaigns than she does maybe, there's always that thing, right? Where there's elected officials that are much better in campaigns than they are, quote unquote, during their mandate. Barack Obama, for example, right? Everybody was betting on him being a one-term president at the end of his presidency. And then in that campaign, he absolutely obliterated Mitt Romney, right?
Yeah.
And then we see that again and again where polls are, Christy Clark, although I am not Christy Clark's biggest fan in BC, the comeback kid, right? Where, poll after poll said the NDP was going to win and yet she won, right? Because she was a good campaigner. I think Plante is a good campaigner. I think we can't underestimate that. I think now they're in an election year. And it's going to be, they're starting to make signals to the left. So, the nomination of this anti-racism commissioner, I said that Legault was playing politics too. There's some politics to it too, right? I mean, it's saying, hey, listen to her base. We're serious about racism. And Valérie Plante can come and say, in many ways, listen, there's nobody that has tried to tackle with the means we have at our disposal as a municipal administration. There's no administration that has been as serious about social housing, is serious about actually, implementing more social housing in this province, fighting in the city, fighting against gentrification. And all in all, the scandals, as I said before, the scandals that this administration has had are nothing in comparison to the scandals that, Union Montréal had back in the day, et cetera, right?
Yeah. It's just a question go on, continue.
Yeah, this being said, the general population tunes in most of the time, 1 or 2 months before. And I think what's going to hurt Plante is this campaign. And there has been, a concerted effort by certain people in La Presse. We've seen, the hit jobs against Valérie and La Presse and all of that. It's funny that La Presse is also owned by the Desmarais. I wonder what, the the links there are.
Yeah.
But it's sure that, we've depicted this government as our municipal administration, rather, as a ideological administration, right? That's only there about bike lanes and about a certain fringe of the population, right? Yeah. Whereas I think that if we look back at it, I mean, it's obviously not a perfect, far from it. It's not perfect, but if we look back at it, this administration has done a lot to better the quality of life for a lot of Montrealers. And we also forget that, Valérie came in with this pink line, right, which was supposed to be the big project of this administration. Everybody laughed at her at the time saying that's never going to happen, right? I don't think a lot of people went to the ballot box saying, oh, I'm voting for Plante, I'm going to get the pink line. Nobody really believed in that. And even us in Projet Montréal, we were like, it's a pretty big promise, somebody for a city that hasn't invested in public transit in decades to get a pink line all of a sudden in 4 years. This being said, if you look at it in the next from now to 2025, we are going to have some semblance of a pink line. At least the neighborhoods that were, kind of left to dry with regards to public transit are going to get some form of public transit. So that is also an accomplishment. And I think that, we can't take it from her and from this administration that they probably, really were tough in those negotiations with Quebec City, et cetera, to try to get that rolling. Yeah. So it is still kind of impressive. This being said, I think that the important thing too is to look at the militant base, and the militant base isn't there anymore, right?
That's the problem, yeah.
Right? So
could she get them back? Militant. Can she get them back, do you think? Maybe not you, but could she get like all of them back? Or a good chunk of them back?
I'm not gonna. For me, I think that if it's between Denis Coderre and Valérie Plante, it is our duty, as people that believe as progressives, right, to kind of like weigh what that means in the balance, right? It would be going backwards for Montreal, big time, for Denis Coderre to come back into power, right?
He might not run. I think he is going to, but he might not run. But
I mean, it's like back in the day when he first announced that he was going to run, right? Like when he announced that he was going to run in 2013, whatever that municipal election was, and we knew for months prior that he was going to run, right? And then everybody, it was the worst kept secret in the province of Quebec that Denis Coderre was going to run. I think Denis Coderre is going to run just because, for all of the criticism we have of Valérie Plante, the opposition is terrible. I mean, the opposition has done an absolutely terrible job because they have no ideological coherency with regards to what they're actually criticizing. Like they criticize to criticize. They don't have a project or a plan for Montreal, right?
Well, their plan is to make money through corruption, probably, but that's
probably right, and real estate development and stuff like that. But at the same time, they go out there and they criticize gentrification and they criticize, real estate developments and stuff like that. But their main donors are real estate developers. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But can she get back her militant base? This is the problem with a lot of left-wing parties, right? That come to power is that, they get into power and there's the pressures that be that kind of, make it that it's a different ballgame, right? When you get into power. And there's two ways to go about it, or there's several ways to go about it. But I think that, just for the sake of trying to simplify this for everybody and not go on for hours about, the problems of the left coming to power, is that you either kind of like, do an FDR, right? When FDR came to power and he said, well, make me do it, right? He told the unions and he told, everybody who was mobilizing and that brought him to power in the New Deal, he was like, well, go out to the streets and make me do it. Push me further. You want something more, then push me to do it, push me to give you that extra step or to take that extra step, etc. Projet Montréal was terrible at doing that, Projet Montréal did not, for all we said about democracy and etc., I think the big failure of this government, of this municipal administration, was to actually, make sure that the people that were there from the start of Projet Montréal, because Projet Montréal was, a party that was, and I was surprised being involved in several political parties that was super open, right? Like you could go there, and it was kind of a breathing in fresh air, like with regards to like the saturated environment of politics most of the time, where you go in and like nobody, like it's the structure and it's so bureaucratic. And Projet was completely different. People from all over the political spectrum. Still, most of the people were left, but with sovereigntist backgrounds, federalist background, and it was kind of like really interesting to see. And we didn't see that transpire in this government, in this municipal administration at all, right? So it's going to be very difficult for them to kind of like in the 7 months leading up to the next campaign, make the case to the people that left their base, come back, now is the time, right? We're going to be different in the next campaign.
Yeah. One thing I do want to just notice is that Projet Montréal, they have a track record of every time somebody is elected under the Projet Montréal banner and runs again under the same banner, I think they always get reelected up until this. I know it's going to be this time, but like it's always like Peter McLean. Then Magda, she kept getting elected. Then people like put the plateau. They never lost control of the plateau once they got it. Like, and I guess this will be the test if that continues. Like it's, I mean, also comes to, there's the base, but also comes down to if people are satisfied with what the government's doing.
I wouldn't bet on that, just because I think that Projet Montréal before was a very like downtown centric, from 2013 to the last election was very downtown centric political party and political formation, right? Yeah. Now we're into like more of suburbs, kind of like Antique, etc., that are not the downtown core, right? And so it's going to be difficult there because, a lot of those people, what they're interested in and kind of what makes or breaks for a lot of people, right, is municipal taxes, right? And in terms of municipal taxes, I know that there's a gel because of, well, they're justifying it because of the pandemic, etc., that, there's now they froze, the hike in municipal taxes was supposed to take place this year, so maybe that will help them in some boroughs, etc. But I think that right now, if it's between Coderre and Valérie Plante, it's Valérie Plante's campaign to lose.
True.
Because nobody likes, like, it's very difficult to lose a campaign and to come back after that, right? Yeah. And I think that, as you said, like, the coalition that formed around Denis Coderre was a coalition of convenience, right? I think the same thing's going to happen this time around, but there are people that are just there for power, right? And so when, you don't answer that thirst for power, then it starts to crumble, right? And I think there's going to be a lot of infighting because they see they see that there's an opportunity here to get back into a power, and there's going to be a lot of infighting, to see who can actually bring them back into power. Right?
Yeah. Well, I guess we're going to have to see. 2017, or sorry, 2017, 2021 is going to be an interesting year. You can check our municipal election coverage on Forget the Box. And now, how do people follow you on social media?
Oh well, I've got an Instagram account and a Facebook account. Most of it's private, but I do have some public posts on my Facebook account. So you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is NCR7. And then on Facebook, you've got, my Facebook account that you can add. But yeah, so, and sometimes I used to write for Forget the Box. So there's always obviously my articles, but they date from a while back, but maybe I'll be getting back to writing some things.
Maybe we'll talk about some municipal politics. Yeah. Okay. Follow me on Twitter at Jason C. McLean, Instagram as well too. And you can also, of course, follow Forget the Box. Give us a like and a share on this video on Facebook, on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Forget the Box. And of course, for columns and writing, check out forgetthebox.net. We'll see you next week for FTB Fridays.